What if I told you the secret to learning Spanish isn't memorizing flashcards, it's math? I'm Hamid, I'm 16 and fluent in 4 languages, and I got fluent in Spanish in 120 hours of studying, and now I get people fluent fast.
Podré para mejorar mi español cuando no tengo mucho tiempo libre para estudiar español.
In this video, I'll show you how mathematical patterns, the same logic behind equations, can actually get you fluent in Spanish. And by the end, you'll see language learning in a completely new way. One that's logical, predictable, and actually effective. And if you make it to the end of the video, then I have a free gift waiting for you. You see, in math, there are 2 mathematical concepts that are very important to understand: expressions and equations. So let's start with expressions. An expression in math is just a value, okay? So if we take 1 is a value. 1 plus 1 is also a value. And so you can relate expressions to the verb to express. We're expressing a certain value, okay? So 1 plus 1 is an expression, okay? 2 is also an expression. Now, equations is when we equate 2 expressions. So when we have something like 1 plus 1 equals 2, this is an equation, meaning it's this expression is equivalent to this expression. That's what it means, okay? And that's related to the word equal, right? Equation is related to the word equal, which means the same. And so 1 plus 1 is just another way of expressing 2, just like how 2 is another way of expressing 4 divided by 2. And so in math, what we'll see a lot of people do is find different ways to express the same expression, aka value, in a way that's more digestible and easier to understand. And so even though this is math and this seems kind of irrelevant, we actually use this concept of expressions and equations a lot in our lives. You see, there's this book called Atomic Habits. And in the book, it talks about how when we want to do a task that we don't really want to do, so this big, hard task, okay, let's say hitting the gym, the mindset that it presents is that instead of thinking of the task as this big, bold task, like going to the gym, in reality, we should just frame the gym, or hitting the gym, right, the task of gym, as the first step we need to do, which is, for example, get out of bed. Get out bed. And then once we've done that, the next task is to grab your keys. Then it's put on your headphones, etc. And thinking about it through this frame is actually better than thinking about it through the frame of hitting the gym directly. Because it's much easier for us to think, okay, right now, all I have to do is just get out of bed. Boom. Okay, all I have to do now is just grab my keys. Boom. Okay, all I have to do is just grab my headphones. Boom. And eventually, we'll get this expression to equal this expression, which is hitting the gym, meaning all the tasks lined up will lead to us hitting the gym. And so this frame of expressing hitting the gym in a different way that's easier for us to actually implement is how we use expressions and equations in our daily lives to get stuff done. And so you probably heard of this advice before, where instead of imagining a big task as the big task, we should just imagine it as the many small tasks that leads to the big task. And so what we're doing is we're expressing the big tasks in a different way that's easier for us to understand and implement. And so with this exact same concept, let's apply this to getting fluent in Spanish. So instead of the gym, let's have fluency here. And so now the question becomes, what is fluency? So I remember when I first thought of what fluency is, and I'd been watching tons of YouTube videos, and I was getting into that space of language learning, specifically in learning Spanish. And so even though fluency seems like it should have a direct definition, which, you know, the Oxford Dictionary, for example, does, it seemed kind of controversial online. And so from doing all this research, I had come to my perfect definition. From the YouTubers I'd seen and from the Oxford Dictionary, and basically what everyone said was that fluency is defined as being fluent. And being fluent is defined as having fluidity when you speak, having flow. Here's where the disagreement comes. Being fluent is defined as being able to speak effortlessly and articulately. That's what a lot of people say when it comes to Spanish fluency. But this is not accurate in relation to most people's goals, and it wasn't accurate in relation to my goals either. Because if I can speak fast, that doesn't necessitate that I can actually make connections with people and that I can have a conversation. There have been many times that I've spoken to people with perfect accents in Spanish, and they can speak very fast, but they just can't have a conversation. And that's the issue right there, because when we talk about fluency, we're talking about it in the context of communication. There are 2 definitions of fluency that I like to define, and this is also what I saw a YouTuber who got fluent very quickly also define it as. And that is conversational fluency and native level fluency. So conversational fluency is being able to have a conversation in Spanish where both parties fully understand each other to the point where they can have a full conversation. Okay? That's the distinction. The flow is in the conversation, not necessarily only in your speech, which means you can stutter. You can say, It can take 5 seconds for you to utter a sentence. But as long as the flow is there, as long as there's a back and forth in the conversation, then you're fluent, or at least you're conversationally fluent. There still has to be fluidity, okay? Or else it's not fluency. There still has to be fluidity, but the fluidity is in the conversation. Comparatively, native level fluency is when you're indistinguishable from a native. And this is also usually in the context of conversation, because there are natives who can't read or write as well. I think Mike Tyson can't read or write, for example. And so this specifically refers to your accent being on point. You're able to understand every bit of Spanish, and you're essentially perfect in every aspect of conversations. And so really how we're defining fluency is fluidity in conversations. Okay? And so this matters because of what I like to call the effort discrepancy, and I'll go through this very quickly. There's a discrepancy, which is just a complicated word for difference, between how much effort it takes to become conversationally fluent and the amount of results you get compared to how much time and effort it takes to reach native level fluency, respective to how much results do you get. And so really the difference between the time and effort it takes to reach conversational fluency and the time and effort it takes to reach native level fluency is so big, whereas the results is much less. And so this took me 120 hours of studying. It's better cost 5 to 6 months. But this is something I'm still working on. And that kind of gives you that sort of perspective. Most people agree with the definition of fluency, that fluency is effective communication with natives, and specifically in the context of conversations. It is a back and forth with a native. That is fluency. And so I actually stopped studying Spanish after the summer of 2022 because I already got conversationally fluent. And the only real reason I was even interested in reaching native level fluency is just because of me doing the Spanish thing. And even so, I don't even study Spanish that much. So this is what I like to call the fluency equation. So this is the equation that completely changed everything for me, and it is the sole reason to why I got fluent so fast. So here it is. So putting fluency into an equation, this is exactly what that would look like, okay? So this expression of fluency, we've already defined. It is effective communication with natives, specifically in the context of conversations. So it is conversational fluency. Well, if it's conversational fluency, what is a conversation? Because if you can do conversations in Spanish, then you're fluent. So all we have to do now is express conversations in a different way. And so this is the definition of conversation. A conversation is a back and forth. What are the two, meaning there are only two skills or aspects of the language that is occurring in a conversation. And those are speaking and understanding. And specifically, we're talking about the skill of understanding audible sound, right? We're talking about when a native speaks. And so conversational fluency expressed in a different way, or putting it into an equation, would be this right here. It would be speaking multiplied by understanding equals fluency. And it's multiplied because in a conversation, it is back and forth, back and forth. It is multiple times where you're having a back and forth. Now that we have the equation, let's clarify it a bit more, because our definition was conversational fluency with natives. And so in math, what you do on one side of an equation, you do on the other side as well. Okay, whatever the one expression gets, the other expression also gets in order for them to be equivalent, which is what the equal sign means. And so we want real Spanish fluency, meaning we want to be conversationally fluent with natives. That means that we need to be able to speak real Spanish and understand real Spanish, meaning real native Spanish. Okay, so this would mean fast Spanish with accent, with correct accent, and all that. And so this is stuff like regions, slang words, and just speed. Okay, now using the same concept of expressions and equations, what is Spanish? Because we know that we need to speak real Spanish and be able to understand real Spanish. Okay, well, what is Spanish? Because that gets us even more specific into the expression, right? It's the same thing with the gym example, where what does hitting the gym mean? Well, it means getting out of bed. Then it means getting your keys. Then it means putting on your shoes. Then it means closing your door. Then it means getting to the gym. It's all those steps. And so with that same idea, let's express Spanish in another way. And this is what that would be. Spanish is grammar multiplied by vocabulary. So let's dissect this. So vocab is words, okay? Words. So Spanish has words, very simple. Now grammar is how those words are placed and how the verbs are bent and how the language is sort of structured, okay? So if you think about basically any language, there's the actual like sounds and then there's the logic behind how we use those sounds. So grammar is kind of like the logic, which is kind of like the Spanish mind, and vocab is kind of like just the sounds that come out of the Spanish person, right? And so you can't just have one, you have to have both in order to have Spanish, right? If you just have grammar, if you just have the logic of the language but you don't have the vocabulary, you won't be able to say anything because you don't have the vocabulary. But if you just have the vocabulary and you don't know the logic, then you can just say words, but you can't use them because you don't have the logic behind how you would use those verbs and words in a sentence. And so both grammar and vocabulary are essential. And obviously we could keep doing this down to like the smallest grammar stuff. And that's actually exactly how I teach grammar in my program. So I do practice what I preach. And it's exactly how I learn Spanish as well. But as a full equation, this is what fluency looks like. This right here is another way of expressing fluency. Meaning, to get fluent in Spanish, all we need is being able to speak grammar and vocabulary and understand spoken grammar and vocabulary. And specifically grammar multiplied by vocabulary first. In math as well, if you remember PEMDAS, the parentheses means that you do it first. So this needs to happen first, then we understand it. This is how we use math to get fluent in Spanish. And you don't have to be really, really good at math to understand this. I hope this video made sense. So here's that free gift I was talking to you about. If you check the description, then you can join a community that I made called the Speedy Spanish Hub. And it's completely free to join. And I've added courses there teaching you exactly what the fluency equation is and exactly what to do to actually implement the fluency equation. And so you can check the description to join, and that's a place for obsessed Spanish learners to learn together. And so it's completely free to join, and it's just my free gift for you watching the end of the video. And yeah, hope you enjoyed, and stay humble.